Hey, how's it going? It's Stephen here from understandingaudio.com, and I've got a story for you. When I was just a young fella back in Ireland learning how to play guitar, I had a Zoom effects pedal. And I don't know if you remember those or you use those or they're even still in existence, but they were a digital multi-effects unit, a stomp box for guitarists. And they'd all sorts of effects built in, like distortion, overdrive, reverb, delay, flanger, chorus, you name it. And I used to be slated by my friends for having this effects pedal and using it all the time. Yeah, I felt it was good enough. I could play live with it, I could get the sounds I wanted, and I didn't have to spend too much more money on any other pieces of kit. And it was only when I heard the results that my friends were getting with their individual effects units that I really started to realize that my pedal actually sucked. Now don't get me wrong, that Zoom effects pedal served me well, but when I switched over to using individual effects units, that's when I really noticed a big difference in being able to craft the sound that I wanted. So when I started to get into mixing, I brought that philosophy with me. Whenever I was using virtual instruments of any kind, I always made sure that I tried to find the equivalent of a stomp box to complement that sound, not use everything all in one, not use everything that was all built into the one package. And it wasn't until years and years later that what I was doing was verified by somebody at the very, very top of their game. The studio I was working in at the time held a seminar with Young Guru, and he was sharing with us his frustrations around when people send him printed stereo stems with the effects from VSTs already printed on them. Now his take on it, and this is me obviously paraphrasing, was that why send him something with the cheap effects that come with your virtual instruments printed onto an audio track when you could use the great sounds that your VST creates and then marry that with the incredible outboard gear and plugins that he has at his disposal. More often than not, and no, this is not always the case, but more often than not, the effects that come with your VSTs don't quite match the quality of the instruments themselves. So what Young Guru said makes complete sense. And when a producer of his quality and Jay-Z's mixing engineer talks, I listen. Now you don't need the same outboard gear that he has or the plugins that he has to get the same results. But what I do recommend is that if you're going to use a VST like Expand, you might want to add in some reverb as you're going along. You might want to add in some effects. This is a hall reverb. And that's fine. That'll give you a sense of what that instrument is going to sound like in your mix and the style that you're going for. But when you are going to mix, I would say that you should actually just turn this off and go and set up another reverb send and use that instead with a much higher quality reverb. It's all well and good me talking about this, but let me play you some examples. So let me play you back a pad part that I created with Expand, the VST that comes with Pro Tools. Let's solo this. Alright, now I'm just going to add in a little bit of hall reverb. It's quite subtle, but it's there. That's it, overcooked. So you can get the idea from that. I had that at -5.4. So if I take that hall reverb out and then use a dedicated reverb plugin instead of using the inbuilt reverb in Expand, I use this Manny Marroquin reverb. Now you can use any reverb that you want. This is the one that I'm using. So it's the same idea here. I've got a hall reverb set up. Let's just hear what this does when I play it back. So this is the pad dry. Alright, now adding in the reverb. Just thickens out the sound. Is it overdone? Back to where it was. It's quite rich sounding. This is it without it. Now again, this is the expand reverb. Same level of signal being sent. Manny Marroquin reverb, or the dedicated reverb plugin, wins hands down. Alright, so that's one example of how you can hear the difference when you use a dedicated plugin that is just made to do that job, a reverb plugin. So let's see if we can do the same thing with a delay plugin. Here is a piano part that I played in. Pretty standard stuff. Let's add some stereo delay. So the send level is -6. Now if I take this out, let's try again and bring in the delay I actually use. It's much cooler to my ears. It's at -5.9, -6. Take this out. Let's try again. And this was the expand delay. It's just not the same quality. Alright, so it's important to note that I'm using a delay plugin here. It's a stereo delay, pretty much exactly the same as what Expand is doing. It's just a dedicated plugin. There's a couple more options that you can use, and I'm also then EQing that delay, taking out some high end, taking out some low end. Then I put a lo-fi plugin on, a little bit of distortion, a little bit of bit cushion, and reducing the sample rate on it. This is a perfect example of just how much more flexibility you get when you don't use the effects that are built into your VST. And also, like I said, with the main example of somebody like Young Guru, if you're sending your stems off to be mixed, you're better off sending them dry. The chances that your mixing engineer has better gear than you are pretty high. And if you really want, you can always send a wet and a dry version of your sounds so that the engineer mixing it can get a really good idea of what you want to achieve. Of course, if you're mixing your own stuff, it just makes sense to do this kind of near the start. Once you've got an idea of where you're going with it, you can go in, you can use the inbuilt stereo delay in Expand just to get an idea of what you want to use, and you can keep those sends where they are. And then later on in the mix, you might just turn this off and replicate it with this delay send. And then you can add in your EQ and your lo-fi and all those cool things that we spoke about. Now, this doesn't just apply to delay and reverb. Here I've got a distortion sound coming from my bass. I'm using Massive to create a bass rather than using the inbuilt distortion in Massive, which you could use if you wanted to. I'm using a separate distortion sound. Here I've got lo-fi. You could have something like, I don't know, SansAmp or whatever plugin you want. Alright, so I'm sure you want to hear what this sounds like when it's all put together, so here it is. Today's video is a perfect example of how you can use your taste to really bring out the best in your music. And the instruments that you might be using, like in this video I mentioned expand and massive, you might be using, you know, whatever instrument you've got, contact or anything like that. And they're all great. But you can see just from this little tip how pro mixers use effects on virtual instruments. That is those subtle differences that really make you stand out as a mixer or a producer. And the great news about all of this is that it all boils down to your taste. You might like using a cheaper kind of delay sound or reverb sound, and that's cool, that's all part of your style. Or you might want your music to sound more expensive. And you know what I mean by sounding more expensive. It doesn't sound as rough and ready. And you already have that, you already know that. It's built up inside you, it's innate. You've developed that over the years already just from listening to tons and tons of music and from working on music. And one of my main goals is to show you that mixing and producing music is a lot more simple than it's made out to be, because you have that taste that you can bring to the table, and that's what makes you unique. So I want to give you something today that's going to unlock that. It's my guide, the one hack that guarantees a unique pro sounding mix. Now I feel that the information in this is so valuable that I should be charging a lot more than I am charging for it. You know why? It's completely free. All you have to do to grab the guide and learn the one hack is go over to getpromixes.com, drop in your email address, and it's all yours for free today. When you do put in the email address and download the guide, you're going to hear from me a lot more with stuff that I don't share on YouTube or anywhere else. It only goes to my subscribers at understandingaudio.com. Now I want you to be a subscriber as well, so all you have to do is download the guide. While you're at it, like this video and subscribe on YouTube as well. It can do you no harm. Now before I go, I'd really like to know, do you notice the difference when you use dedicated reverb, delay and distortion plugins rather than those built into your virtual instruments? Would you be like me years ago with my Zoom effects pedal, or would you have individual stomp boxes to do the jobs that they're made to do? I'd really like to know, so leave a comment down below. And by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, the best place to leave a comment is over at understandingaudio.com. I read every single comment that I get and I try to reply to as many as I possibly can. So that is it from me. I'll be back with another new video very soon. In the meantime, watch all of the rest of them. Keep having fun and making great music, and I'll see you very soon.